monetization is connected to how you produce something. It is costly to set up cameras and have a crew to cover all of those things. It is costly for a newspaper to have different kinds of bureaus around the country. And if you notice, increasingly, all of the major news networks have shut down bureaus everywhere. So monetization is not just about access. It's also about how you produce it and how you provide it and the expenses attendant to that.
I would add in about the rights issue. I mean, it's so fundamentally important in terms of the public interest. That's one of the places where I think the problems can result. I mean, there's entertainment content people might want, and they can use a VPN. I spent 2013 in Qatar in the Gulf of Arabia, and a lot of people use a VPN. Some people used a sling box, to get content legally from back in the U.S. or elsewhere. But there was just the ruling, or at least a panel of judges ruled on Lens versus Universal about fair use, and saying that she didn't violate copyright. So I think there's a lot of interesting things to happen. I think we should try to somehow find a way to keep the public interest in there, that it doesn't just become completely driven by monetary interests.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Bob Atkinson with CITI. I didn't hear anyone particularly speaking about education and the impact of all your glorious new technologies, et cetera, on education. But I've recently skimmed a OECD study, it was a second one, which implies, or actually has good data, that indicates that the internet and a lot of entertainment on the internet already is crowding out real learning. And the data shows that students who use a lot of internet perform worse on basic reading, writing, and arithmetic than those who don't, because according to the study, true learning, thinking gets crowded out by the glamorous stuff that comes over their little units. And now I'm hearing that few younger people don't even speak to each other. I hear that there's automated systems for writing, so I assume that'll work its way down to the consumer level. So what happens to reading, writing, arithmetic, and most importantly, thinking with your wonderful technologies?
It's such a big issue. I think we could have a whole conference. Maybe we should have another conference on this. But I remember something Ellie once said. I was going to help Columbia start something called Fathom, which was their e-learning company about 15 years ago. It kind of crashed and burned in the dot-com bubble. But Ellie, you had said something about universities being really in the business of degrees, and if Fathom wasn't going to do that, it had a very limited opportunity. So I think one question is, in the educational arena, in terms of online, if that's where you want to go with it, is how they could potentially make that viable. And then another side of it is the learning side itself. What is it doing to student learning? And I think that it's certainly, I think early in the process in terms of what the evidence is, but I think there are ways to engage students in the environment they're really comfortable with, and to use a technology to kind of get them involved as participants in the learning process, so the teacher starts to become more like a guide and keeps them as a mentor. And I think that's where it could potentially go in a positive way, rather than all just becoming a distraction and attention being completely atomized.
Okay, that's about all I'd like to do on that particular diversion on this subject. We only have a few minutes left. Do you have another question?
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Richard Field, a lawyer. I work on harmonizing technology law. In response to Evangeline, you raised the point that people are looking for the limits. What are the new tools and new technologies? And in a way that's a bit of navel gazing, I think. There's two sides to it. One are the limits of your tools, and what can you do that's more interesting given the new
limits
capability.
and possibilities too.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. But two is what you're saying, what your ideas are. And maybe that's going to some of Bob's point. But what are the ideas? Now, I'm wondering if you need to reach the limits in order to get to the new ideas. Are there two different things going on? Does it happen to be that the people who have all the money are both looking for the limits of the technology and are the same people with the ideas. Like some of these TV shows and all are raising very interesting new ideas, and that the person who with his cat video on YouTube just isn't raising interesting things, and that's why they're not succeeding. But where are the two halves of that going? Can you have new ideas that are crude and are still going to get an audience? I mean, you see it in politics today, I suppose.
Who was it? Cupid Pie or whatever has made $12 million?
PewDiePie.
PewDiePie, $12 million. And
Do you need both, or is it, are there two different
I
ways?
think it's nice to have both, but you can do it with either. And artists traditionally, and this isn't just with new media, I mean, and if you want to think about it, look at what the Cubists did in terms of looking at anything from multiple points of view, and this is pushing the creative aspect and the technology. The bleeding edge artists working with technology today, a lot of them have as a goal something like the holotech, the hollow Star Trek environment. They're pushing an artist, in order to realize what their vision is in a new technology, has to figure out a way to do that, and those ways are not known. And it's not exactly this discussion, but this is an interesting panel because it goes from the creative, from the individual creative to the corporate creative, which is working with very talented people and artists as well, to new technology and its implications in society for getting it out into society. So this is a kind of wide view that this panel has. And so some artists have had money and make great art. Some artists have had money and make terrible art. And some artists, that's not a real determining factor, I would say. Typically, however, if you have more money, you have more resources to make a richer visual kind of production. And you can often use higher end, more expensive equipment. And you probably could not do a blockbuster with your iPhone camera, okay? Nonetheless, you can do something that's really creative, perhaps, and move up that channel and of producers and get recognized and be given more and more resources to do something better. So I think that's sort of the answer to that question.
I was just going to add one thing about the large picture. I don't know that we could have gotten a character like Walter White in Breaking Bad, who is such a morally complex character and who challenges our own sense of the big issue of what is the right thing to do and whom do we root for in a morally complicated world, unless we had 5 seasons. So the bucket of television allows for a longer understanding of character and a different kind of moral story to be told. And so sometimes I think, and that's what I meant, you have to think about what is the large point that you're trying to make, either about society or about a character, and think about what the right bucket is that you're going to be allowed to tell that story. And that's why I also think in this area of, if you will, the complementarity of stories and moral positions, in a curious way, to me, the threshold is going to be interactive. It's going to happen on the internet because we're going to want to see a mosaic of understanding of it. So we might actually be working toward thinking about bigger, more important issues because we'll have this capability.
I think that's our panel for today. Thank you very much.
Very good comments.